Well, it's a joy to be with you this morning. I'm always happy to be with the saints as we meet and talk about things that are eternal. And I've been encouraged to put this little mic on, and I've just about got that done. And if I can figure out how to turn it on, I think that I did. And so you should be hearing me now. Let me walk away. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, that's good. I'm always enjoying being here. I brought a gift for everybody here, and it's called Soul, S-O-L, to Soul, S-O-U-L. And this is a little booklet that we're giving out to members of the church all over the United States, all over the world. And so if I can get some help on this, and pass one to each family, if there's enough for everybody, let's give everybody one, okay? This here is what we call a solar unit, and this solar unit is for churches of Christ that do not have electricity or that basically cannot speak English. And this is our third round now. Our first round was 3 countries in Africa, and then the next round was to 4 countries in Africa, and one of them was in the Ethiopian language. And now this is in the Hispanic world, and this here tells you what this does. But this little solar unit, we send it, and we don't mail it, we don't send it by FedEx. We have members of the church take it and hand deliver it to the different places that we go. And so in looking at where will this go, it will go into the places where the Spanish is the language, such as Mexico, such as Central America, such as South America, and to people that cannot and do not have electricity. And this little puppy, it's a little solar unit, but I call it a puppy. This little puppy, you put it on a rock for about 5 or 6 hours, and it charges up, and it'll give you 10 hours of Bible study. On this, we have the whole curriculum for the Sunset International Bible Institute. We have also on it Old and New Testament. Also, we have the World Bible School, which is a Bible correspondence course for people who are not members of the body of Christ. And we also offer a cappella singing on it, maybe 2 hours of different songs, wherein that people can learn those songs singing along with that. And so I thought I'd give you that as a nice gift, something that you will enjoy. And I work with Sunset, and I have for years and years and years and years, 40 years. And what I do is an interesting work. I recruit students, and by the way, we have 6 students now in Lubbock and that are participating in that program this year. And so I just enjoy having that kind of as my little job of something going on in my life other than just working with a local church. And I work with a local church for almost 50 years, or 50 years now. And so I noted here that in looking at my work has a lot of interesting turns to it. I'm talking about the seasons of life, and I thought I'd talk about one that would allow me to meddle a little this morning, okay? And I'm assuming that it's in our order of worship. If it's not, why, there'll be a few copies somewhere that Doc can get to you. I call it the season of stress. All of us have stress in our life. Sometimes we may call it worry, sometimes we may call it anxiety, but there's something behind that that's called stress. And stress is kind of like this right here. It's a little children's book that's written called Alexander and the Terrible, Terrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. He said he went to sleep with gum in his mouth, and now it's in his hair. He got up and tripped over his skateboard. He dropped his sweater in the sink, and the water was in the sink. He had a terrible day at school, bad deal with the dentist, a rough time at the shoe store, and after supper, he says, I'm just going to move to Australia. And so I want to go to Australia. I don't know whether I'll get to, but I've never been there. I'd like to go to New Zealand while I was down there too. Have friends down there that are missionaries and things that are happening that are really good. Listen while I read you some from the book of Psalms, chapter 46. And it says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with swelling, God will be there. God will be there. I continue to read. There's a river. I'm reading now from chapter 46 again. And this, whose streams shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her just at the break of dawn. The nations raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, and the earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. I thought I'd talk a little bit about stress. Stress is real. It can be measured. Psychologists have come up with a way to do that. And I'm not saying basically that they're the last answer. I'm saying God's the last answer, because what I read from the Psalms here was written by one who was involved in having a stressful time. And so I thought in terms of stress. The highest level of stress, maybe there's several, but one or two I'll mention, is the death of a spouse. That brings about a high level of stress. And I thought in terms of perhaps maybe a high level of stress brought about by a child that was troubled, had sickness, and that's a high level stress thing. I thought about looking at the death in our family, in one of our family members. That's a stressful thing. And I thought about just a plain old simple good, is there such a thing as good, fuss between a husband and a wife brings about stress. And I thought in terms of doing church work. There's stress things in doing the work of God. Trying to discern not just good from bad, but good from better, or good from best. Some of that brings forth stress. I thought that we live in a hurry, worry, and bury world. There's a painstaking process of maturing. A lot of it includes waiting. A lot of it includes failing or losing. And a lot of it is because we can be misunderstood from time to time. And so I thought in terms, if you want to take a stress level test sometime, you talk to Dot. Now, I might be volunteering her for something that she's not going to do, but anyway, I think she wouldn't run away, you know. And so there's upheaval in nature, natural phenomenon in 46 verses 1 to 3 of the book of Psalms, earthquakes, hurricanes, and floods. Boy, we've had floods in the United States. We've had flood right where the little community where I live. It didn't get in my house and it didn't get on our road, but I couldn't get in and out, and the National Guard had to come, Bill and Dot, get us and haul us out of there. Boy, they're fixing that now. You know, they learned some things in our little settlement there, and I thought, wow, good. Something good is happening from that. Civil disturbances, boy, you look at the warfare today. That's been going on. This is probably the longest war that we've been in the United States over the Middle East. And I'm thinking, and I won't get on that because that's political, but I'm going to say, if anything could be handled poorly, that was handled poorly and is still being handled poorly. And I thought, wow, you know, Elvis had some way of looking at that, and he just said, I'm all shook up. I'm all shook up. You had a failure in your job, failure in your marriage, failure in your health. You know, a doctor sometimes eases that to you. I remember when I was going to doctor for just a plain old checkup, and when he got through, he said, you're going to have open heart surgery. Now, I mean, you know, I wasn't even thinking about my heart. You're going to have, I said, well, how many months I got to get? He said, we're going to have it this week. And I said, why are we going to have it this week? I said, I think I need a second opinion on that. So he said, here's you a good doctor to go to. That was my primary doctor. And he sent me to a doctor down at St. Luke's Hospital. And I went in, took all my records with me, and he looked at all of that stuff and listened to it and all like that. And he said, you're going to have surgery. I said, how many weeks do I have? He said, we're going to schedule it for Thursday. That was Wednesday. And I thought, that shakes you up just a little bit, you see. Doc said, our kids don't even know about it. He said, step into my office and call them. I mean, right there. And I thought, wow, that kind of brings about a little stress, you see. Thursday I had the surgery, out and went home on Monday, preached the following Sunday week, and been preaching ever since. However, that shook me up. I was out another time to the doctor, just for a checkup. And he checked me up, and he said, how you feel? I said, I feel great. He said, well, I got news for you. You got cancer. Huh? What? You got cancer. What are we going to do about it? I said. I knew right then I was in trouble. He said, we'll take surgery, take care of it. And I said, well, I've got to talk to somebody yet on that. He said, I don't mind you doing that. I called my friend back in Ocala, Florida, who is a faithful Christian, a doctor back there, a surgeon that does this kind of work. And he said, I told him the story, and he said, Bill, you don't need a surgeon. He said, I've been in urology now for 30 years, and I've only done 1 or 2 surgeries for prostate. He said, you got to go another route. You'll be better off if you do nothing than you have surgery. I said, well, why? He said, you ever looked at the calendar and see how old you are? You're too old for that. Oh, okay. All right, got to have plan B. Plan B found Doc and me in Atlanta, Georgia for 3 months, going through a procedure there, and I'm cancer-free. Now, you know, you never know what's going to happen, and so I thought in terms of, wow, that's tough. I put down here also, you can have what I call post-battle fatigue. That's Psalms 46, verses 8 through 11. When depression and fatigue set in, and in that particular text there, and I'll read it to you. Come, behold the works of the Lord, who has made desolations of the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot in the fire. Verse 10, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Verse 11, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. And I was reading from the New King James Version in that text. I thought in terms of looking at what do we do about it? I know there are ways to find out. I know there are ways to find out if you're going to have heart surgery. I know there are ways to find out, but you got to do something about it. There's a commercial. I like commercials. Some of them are real funny. And I remember this guy was looking in this man's mouth, and he had his mouth wide open, and he said, you got the worst cavity I've ever seen. And the guy said that he had the mouth open. He said, what you going to do about it? He said, I'm not a doctor. I'll tell the doctor that you got a bad cavity, but I'm not a dentist. I'm just not a dentist. And someone came in and said, let's go eat. And they walked out the door, and the old boy's sitting there in that chair with his mouth propped open. And I thought, isn't it amazing how when we start looking at what can I do about it? Well, I'm going to tell you, there's some answers in the heart of our God for what I call the season of stress. Young people have that. They have that in tremendous ways. And if you're a teenager, and we have some teenagers here, you're going to know that. You're going to find out a little bit about that. As you grow, we have two here young ladies that are a little older than our other one little lady here. And the older ones are probably already experiencing some stress in your life. I hope I can add a little stress to it as I get you to do the puppets on Wednesday nights, you see. I don't mind doing that. And so, in looking at what's the answer, and I'm going to give you something to think about here. And then that will be my lesson. I've got about 10 minutes to do that. Natural calamities bring fear and threat. They do. We sold it now, a country place up in Livingston area. We had 2 hurricanes go through there. The first one brought down about 100 trees and put one big tree right down into our little guest house we had up there. The second one brought down another about 150 trees and put 8 trees on the house that we were living in. The first one we rode out. The second one we didn't ride out. We got out of Dodge, out of Livingston to take care of that. And so, but in the text here, he says, I will not fear. I will not fear. Fear is it's a seasonable thing. We're afraid about a lot of things. Older we get, seemingly, the more afraid we are. And we need to stop and think in terms of, in this psalm, that he talks about this here. He says, I will not fear. I will not fear. And I thought, okay, I can turn that on and turn it off. It is not something that I've got a plague like a bad heart or something like that. It's something that I can turn on and turn off. I can quit thinking about being afraid. And I'm going to tell you how. I can stop being afraid. Number 2 I put down here. He talks about a city being under attack. And here's what the text said. I will not be moved. I will not be moved. And I thought, okay, I can understand it. I will not be moved. Number 3, I put a period of time following these calamities. I will not strive. I will not strive. In the text he says that. And so I wrote down how to cope. And I put cease striving, relax. The Hebrew word is rapha. And we say, and we read, slow me down, Lord. Slow me down, Lord. In looking at my final 4 or 5 minutes, my stress, God's strength, Psalms 46. His strength is immediately available. Immediately available. Did you ever have a situation on that first hurricane we had? Our kids were with us, and they were going to stay up in the little guest house, and Dot said, no, I insist that you stay down here in the house with us. The bed that they would have slept in had an oak tree right down in it, right down in, through the roof, down. It would have killed them. And I thought, well, God sure blessed them. I'm sure glad Dot said, come down to the house, and I'm sure glad they said, okay. But his strength is immediately available. If I've been to your house, or you've been to my house, I always pray with you. And if I go to your house and you offer to pray for me, or pray with me, boy, I will bow my head because I really believe that God answers prayer. I really believe that with all my heart. Number 2, I put God's power is overpowering. A tent that can stretch over any stress. A tent Burns family, if I can say that, or Cindy's family, or Rose's family. Boy, you've been through a lot of stress. I've just been here 9 months, but boy, your family's gone through some very stressful times. And I thought, I ride with Bird when we go to the preacher's luncheon. God's power is overpowering, a tent that can stretch over any stress. You don't have to answer this, but have you ever slept in a tent? I have, a pup tent. I was in the Boy Scouts, and we went to an island. Had to have a boat to get out there. And it was a nice island on the Chickamauga Lake. So we were pitching our tents. And in pitching your tent, we wanted to be kind of ahead of the crowd, so we found a ditch. And we pitched that tent over the ditch so you could just almost stand up and the tent would be all right. We didn't plan on the storm that came. And when that storm came, that water came down through there about 1.5 feet deep, washed everything we had on down out toward the lake. And in that particular case there, the tent was still standing, and we were there up to our knees in water. I thought about that story, a tent that can stretch over any stress. We got through that. We got through that. Nobody was hurt, especially us. We didn't drown. God saw us through that. We were just kids. Just kids. I put number 3, His power does not depend on my help. I noted here that we're weak sometimes. We're weak sometimes. Boy, if you don't have a strong friend that can be as strong when you need a strong friend, that ought to be important to you. I've got a strong friend. I sit by her when we're in services. I stand by her when we sing. But I have friends, other friends in that will call and just encourage me. You ever have, I'm going to bring my turkey call over here sometime, and I'm not going to use it here in the auditorium, but I've got a turkey call. And right on that turkey call it says, Tom Gaskins, and had the little town that he was in. And we had company over on Friday night for supper, so I was giving them how to make this turkey call work. And David was there. He's got one of these phones that'll do everything but milk a cow. I mean, it'll do a lot of things. And so he said, I'll find him for you. He found him for me in Venus, not Venice, but Venus, Florida. And I just called him. I said, Tom Gaskin. He said, Bill Yasko. I said, that's right. He said, Bill, how old are you? And I told him. I said, how old are you? And he told me. I'm 4 years older than he is. We talked for a little while. I said, now I'm going to tell you what I remember about you. When I lived in Florida, he lived in what I called a swamp, he and his family. And they made these cypress knees. And we took a hike out through that area. And I told him, I said, Tom Gaskin, if we're ever attacked by a nuclear attack, the first person I'm going to talk to is God. And the second person I'm going to talk to is to tell you, how do I get back here so I can be out here where there's nothing. There's nothing out here. So I thought in terms of, wow, I'm weak. I was weak in handling that. But boy, he sure encouraged me. Now I'm going to follow up on that, and the next time I go to Florida, well, I'll go see him. We're great friends. We just hadn't talked in a while. 4 threatening storms in our life are designed to slow us down, to make us climb into His arms and force us to depend on the God of all comfort. If you hear the little child talking a little bit, I really have a special affection for this child. Simply because I was in the home, Dot and I were in the home, and the mother's just a new Christian. And They're just a good family, good family. And I thought, I listen for anything that this child will say that's a word. And so, did you do that when your children were small? You wanted to hear what they had. They had a whole lot of that stuff. I remember when our third grandson came along, whenever he'd go hoogla, hoogla, while his mom and daddy go hoogla, hoogla back to him, he wasn't making a word. I've never heard of that word before. He made it up right then. And I thought, what this child needs is what this child's getting, is somebody to help, speech therapy and things like that. Wow. And so, Sabrina, just remember that the threatening storms in our life are designed to slow us down, make us climb into His arms, and force us to depend on God, the God of all comfort. I'll just say that, because that's what we thought with our little granddaughter, great-granddaughter, you know. And so here she now, she sounds like she's been vaccinated with a phonograph needle. I mean, she just talks all the time. We're very happy about that. From the heart, I say this. Stress, and we all have it. Anxiety, however you want to call it. If it's handled properly, you'll go on through life. And you'll just look at each victory behind that. But if we don't handle it, we're going to be struck with, I'm going to say, having our joy taken away from us. Having our joy taken away from us. Circumstances can take away your joy. People can take away your joy. Worry can take away your joy. Things can take away your joy. I'm just citing that from Philippians 1, 2, 3, and 4. In chapter 4, beginning with verse 6, he talks about having a peace within you that can pass all understanding. And he gives 3 things there. I've got 2 minutes left. The first one is a good prayer life. A good prayer life. He says if you have a good prayer life, you can overcome worry, stress. You can overcome it in such a way as you'll have peace within you. We're always going to have circumstances. We're always going to have people. We're always going to have things. We're always going to have these things that are going to try to rob us of our joy. And I'm saying, he says there that a good prayer life will help. He says the second thing in Philippians 4 and verse 8. What do you think about? What do you think about? He says, how about thinking on these things? And he gives about 7 or 8 things there to think on. Read the text. He'll tell you, here's what you need to think about. Your thoughts can lie to you. Did you know that? But the Word of God won't lie to you. And if he says, you think about this, and you spend some time thinking about it, it's going to accomplish a purpose. I thought about, I was raised in a family that religion was not important at all. We'd go to church from time to time, a little congregation down in Falling Water where I was raised. It's a little Baptist church there, and we'd go down there, and it was a good place for somewhat of a social life or whatever. But I went down there probably in my whole young life, maybe 10 times, I don't know. But I did not learn much. I learned very little. And I learned when I started dating Dot that the Bible makes sense. It makes sense. And if you're a seeker, seeking the Word of God, you'll find it in the Bible. Someone will help you. Dot came from a big family. On one side of the table there's a bench that would seat about 6 people. And when I'd go up there to eat supper, I never got to sit around there with the adults. I sat with the kids, and they had me sitting right up by her dad. And her dad was a gospel preacher. And he'd ask me questions all the time that I was eating, put a little stress on me. For that stress, I was grateful. But you think about things. And the last thought that he says there in verse 9, Paul said, you know you can imitate me. And he says that again in 1 Corinthians, I guess it's chapter 8, beginning with verse 1. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Somebody you can talk to. Somebody you can talk to. You can talk to God. God will direct you if you're seeking the truth. He will direct you. He's not going to perform a miracle and have a plane go over and write with his writing GP, go preach. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that if you'll sit at the feet of people who love the Bible, people who love to talk to you about the Bible and give them a chance to do so, you'll just find out that the season of stress will just ease on away until the next problem comes up, and it'll come back again, but you'll know how to handle it, you see. I forgive people when they ask me, please forgive me. Every time they ask me, I don't care how many times it is, because I know I'm going to sin, and I'm going to need God to forgive me. No matter how many times. 7 or 70 times 7. I read that in the Bible. So, if you're not a Christian, I hope that you'll let someone talk to you about being a Christian. He says the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch, and that's in Acts 11 and verse 26. So it's good to be called a Christian, just a Christian. Christian only Christian. If you need the prayers of the church, we'll pray with you. Our elders are standing ready to receive you and pray with you. So, if we can help in any way, come to Christ while together we stand and sing. Be seated on the front seat.